Hello, this is Corey Upton on February 22nd, 2020. And I've been doing some talking and thinking with friends about tiny homes. And I've been drawing and thinking about tiny homes and container homes for several years. And last year I built a mobile office in Reno, Nevada. And that was kind of my first foray into actually building something, and I've been following stuff in the seasteading area and people who live in fifth wheels and move around and that kind of lifestyle. Um, I've found that there's a lot of people who are pretty interested in trying that out, but they run into different types of challenges. A lot of them center around um, zoning and legality, minimum square footage laws. Um, those vary a lot from um, county or state to state, but in general, tiny homes are just not that legal. So I identified a a couple challenge areas. One is waste and utilities, um, how to manage sewage, um, getting loans and paying for tiny houses, and then zoning and building codes. And everything kind of comes down to zoning and building codes, as we'll see. Um, so quickly, waste, um, you have to, unless you're using a holding tank, which gets kind of expensive because you have to have it pumped or you have to go, it's expensive or messy, right? You can outsource it. Um, you have to get a perk test for your septic system, and that depends on the ground that you're on and also the area that you're in. Um, I have some friends who I was talking to recently they're in Southern California in the Eastern Sierras, in Lone Pine area, and they are on this cattle ranch, and they built a really neat adobe house. Um, it's uh, it's a non-standard. It's a hay bale house, so it's non-standard construction, and they built a septic system. They had passed their perk test, and they had installed their bathrooms and everything. And then the county, I won't get the story exact, but the county inspector came back from you know the coast and had gone to some conference or thing on regulations on sewage systems, and came back and said that they were no longer in compliance and they couldn't use their septic system. They're also um, near. This is the LA LADWP, the LA aqueduct that um, drained this lake, uh, Owens Lake, and made the valley dry. But that's a whole different story. So they have to use composting toilets in their house, and that's um, still not that's not a lot of fun. So and um, if you're hooking up to utilities, oftentimes you have to comply, like the whole um, kind of the rest of the construction of the house has to meet code in order for you to connect. So if you're too close to a city and you can't do a septic system, then you're limited by the codes as well as just the building codes. But you can't dispose of your waste without meeting codes. Switching over to loans. Um, Loans are just jump down here. Um, so I just made this is just a relative chart. I only pulled out one actual rate. But this is loan term, and then this is the interest rate of the loan. Construction loans are considered high risk. because there's no collateral. As the house is being constructed, there's more collateral, but nobody wants to buy a partially built house. So they're usually less than 12 months and high interest rate. They're also paid out as needed. So as you reach different milestones in your construction project, the bank issues you more money for the next step. You don't get like a lump sum up front, or you don't get the complete loan at the beginning. An RV is it's more like a car or something like that. It's going to be medium term, fairly high rate, and then land. I wasn't sure where to put land. I found different. I think it depends on the type of land and if you're building on it, if it's part of the new construction loan. So land is somewhere in between a house and a high interest construction loan. But again, there's no, besides the land itself, there's no real collateral there. So the bank figures that people aren't living on the land if there's no house there, and therefore they're more willing to walk away if they stop making payments. So that's going to be a higher interest rate. So this is a standard new construction loan process. As I just mentioned, property, it's kind of part of the planning. You need the property to start construction. That aspect, I think, gets worked out with you and your bank on a case-by-case basis. But in general, you're doing the planning. You have to submit drawings from an architect and a budget and a schedule in order to get approved for the construction loan. Once the bank approves the loan, it goes, you start construction, you have a year to finish, and then you either complete, and then the loan is rolled over into a regular mortgage, or you don't finish and you default on the loan, in which case the bank has to try to resell the house or what's been completed. And from their perspective, if you're not building the code, nobody else is going to want it. Code standardizes buildings so that people can evaluate them on an even basis. So if it's not built to code, it's even higher risk because they can't get anyone else to buy it. So good luck on getting new construction for something that is non-standard or isn't to exactly the code, which most tiny homes are not going to be. So loans generally are going to be out, and the good thing about tiny homes is that they are nowhere near as expensive as a traditional house. So hopefully not much of a loan is needed, or the property can be paid in cash. But you still have to comply with zoning, or you have zoning laws to comply with. And there are some states that are fairly friendly to tiny homes and camping on your property and stuff like that, and others are not so into it. So just as an example, this is from Washoe County, Nevada, where I'm at in Reno. I couldn't find the actual zoning law on this, but this is from the Washoe County site, and it's can I live or sleep in my RV or trailer on my own property? The answer is no, not for more than 14 consecutive days for each visit. So if you have a camper on your property and people come visit you, they can't stay in it for more than 14 days, and they can't come more than four times per calendar year. So yeah, not not a viable option to live in a RV or trailer on your own property. So running up to closer to Reno, this is an area, BC Highlands. It's on the way to Virginia City, which is a historic mining district, and it offers some pretty good views of the Mountain Rose, looking up at Lake Tahoe. And so here's a house on Toll Road, 5 acres, 350,000. Got some drone shots of the property. This one is actually it doesn't show here. This is the it's zoned as general commercial, which is interesting. I've seen other ones in here as medium density rural, which sets restrictions on the number of buildings you can have per acre, and it's you need, I think it's like 4 acres per structure or something like that. And so if you are doing container homes and you have a couple buildings spread out, they're not going to meet minimum square footage laws unless you have them connected. And if you have more than a few that are, or more than one that is disconnected from each other, you will run afoul of the density zoning requirements. When I was looking around, I did find an interesting piece of property. It's north of BC Highlands, and it's 10 acres, a lot cheaper than that side on that overlooks Reno. But they have an interesting little bio here. Beautiful 10-acre lot with gentle rolling hills, amazing views. There's a permitted shed on the property, which has the potential to be converted to an in-law quarters. So that would be an ADU or an accessory dwelling unit if you build your main house on the property. So you can have, I believe, only one ADU per main house that meets all the minimum square footage requirements. And if you were in medium density or low density rural, you would only be able to build one of those per one main house per 4 or 6 acres, whatever it is. So you could have on a 10-acre plot, if it's medium density, you could have 2 houses with 2 ADUs. But this is an interesting piece of property because it's obviously not a shed. It is set up as an off-grid cabin with bathroom and all that. So I'm not sure how they're doing that, and kind of the long-term viability of not getting turned in by your neighbors or something like that. One thing I wanted to talk about was I see a lot of tiny homes being built on trailers so they can be registered as recreational vehicles. But going back to that thing, at least in Washoe County, not being able to camp in your own RVs, that doesn't work. I was visiting some friends in San Luis Obispo, and there were some Cal Poly students who had a couch on a small ATV trailer or something like that, and it was parked in their front yard. And the story I got was that um, there had been complaints from the neighbors, and the HOA came after them for having a couch in their front yard. So they, um, being engineering students, went through um, the code book and found that they could have a trailer parked in their driveway, and that was okay. And then there was no restriction on what could be on the trailer, so they put their couch on the trailer. So they put it on wheels, and they got around um, the law that way, but not always the case if you're living on the trailer. So this is an article I wanted to go into a little bit. It was just it was posted almost a year ago. So these are container homes that were built in downtown Reno. Pretty neat looking. The guy who built them. I'll just read a few quotes here. Reno has been very welcoming of new technology and has benefited from the arrival of companies like Tesla. This just puts a neat addition to those things that have come before. So I think what he's talking about is there's kind of this fascination going on with alternate ways of living and tiny homes and container houses. But as we'll see in this article, there's kind of a big gap between what people think container homes are and what's currently allowed to be built. So originally he was going to build a quadplex and ended up going with a duplex. So it's two 1,000 square foot units made out of four, they're 20-foot shipping containers. However, I'm going to jump to these pictures here. This is a photo of their CAD models that was in the news article, and here you can see the structural corner supports of the shipping containers. So they're doing two 20-footers on one end and two 20-footers on the other, and then in between them is standard stick and drywall construction. So while it is incorporating containers into the building, it's not actually a house that you can pick up and move if you don't like the local government or you want to go to a different state. This would not be something that you can transport with you. It's built in to a larger structure that would be destroyed in the moving. So it's kind of using the current cultural attraction of tiny homes to build a traditional building, which is great because it lets people kind of try it out. But it's not actually a tiny home because it's a 1,000 square foot apartment. And also, if we look inside the container part, we see standard stud construction, and that is because you have to build the code, and all the codes are meant for having studs in your wall. In containers, you don't need the same stud spacing because the container is structurally sound on its own. You don't have to build a structure inside of it, except for hanging like drywall. But if you're doing that, your stud spacing can be a lot less, because you only need a stud every 4 feet to hang your plywood on or your drywall. And by putting studs back in, your thermal conductivity goes way up, and you lose a lot of total R value. So if it's cold out, a lot of heat goes through the studs, and your building efficiency goes down. And it's all if it's there, it's only to comply with code. Okay, so back in the article, um, he's talking about the demand for more affordable housing, but the increased cost of development made him decide to rent out the planned 2-bedroom, uh, 2-bath duplex at a higher rate. This has the potential to be an affordable housing solution, but these units will have to be market rate because this project costs so damn much because they're having to comply with all the codes because they're building in the middle of the downtown area. Estimates monthly rents for each unit to be somewhere around $1,400 to $1,500. The average rent for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in Reno was $1,471 during the first quarter of this year. So it's kind of in the image of container homes, but not in the spirit. For one, they're not owned. It's a rental. One of the big pushes between living in small spaces is that you can buy them outright, put them on your own property, and then you don't have rent to pay anymore. And then later in the article, he talks about it's kind of back to the ideal, and so he's talking about kit container homes. He says, unlike traditional stick-built houses, however, shipping container kit homes can come together fast. Once you do the concrete, you just pop in the storage container house in just a few days. It's already painted, pre-plumbed, and has most of the electrical work done. Again, where can you do this? Not in downtown Reno, and not in most downtowns, or in all of Washoe County, for that matter. It goes on. He says that he was asked by the city of Reno if it would be possible to use storage containers for Section 8 housing, where rent would be subsidized by vouchers. So now you have the city saying, no, you can't build these, and then in the next sentence asking if they can be used for Section 8 housing. You don't get both of those. And then at the end, he was expressing some of his. He said that something like he would do this project again, but he was disappointed with how long and how much it cost. And he finished the article with, "I'll see what comes of it. If not, if it doesn't work out, then I'll buy a fishing boat and move to Mexico." So I think this is kind of a story about somebody who is into the container or the tiny living style, and then tried to do everything the right and legal way, and was somewhat disappointed with the results. That said, I think that the structure itself is quite. They did a really good job. It looks really neat, and it's a place I would like to live in. Pictures aren't loading. There it is from the outside. It's a neat. It's a great design. And it does look like there is steel structure under the traditional construction. The wood and drywall side. So maybe that whole section comes out and it can be moved on semis. But this is going to be. It looks like it would be like a large cube. It would be difficult to move, and it would also not hold up well on a flatbed. Like you couldn't just put this on a truck and go to a different state. So I hope to cover that in a future video.